live somewhere now. Huh? Yeah. Because I can't tell how many people are in the chat now or what. There's no chat right now. I've had to make a whole new thing. this on. Hopefully not. Hello. My God, I am so sorry about that. I'm here. Hello. Nice to meet you. I'm going to turn this down a bit. This is very loud for me. Sorry. That was wild. I don't know what happened with OBS, but managed to get something sorted in the end. So lovely to see you all. Hello. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Let me know if the music's too loud or too low. Fingers crossed this is still working. I'm still live. I'll wait a few minutes just to see if everything's okay. And I'll keep ranting on and talking in the meanwhile. Okay. Okay, we can see me. Cool. Great. Super. Hope you're all doing okay. Thank you all for joining me. It's currently midnight midnight for me here. Up in the north of Finland. So we'll see how this goes. See how many people we get. How many people are interested in watching. And yeah, I'm still playing around with time, seeing what works for all of you, best of all. And this seems to be what everyone voted on, so hopefully this is a good time. Everything's good. You can see in here. Cool. Music's not too loud. I'm actually going to turn it down a teeny bit for myself because it's blasting in my ears. This beautiful bardic music. Okay. Well, welcome. My name is the Ugly Goblin, and no, it's not. This is the Ugly Goblin. My name is Gabriel Galway, and I'm slowly becoming an Ugly Goblin over time. So, as promised, it's a few months back now. I promised that if we get to 3,000 subscribers, I was going to do a live stream where I show you my fantasy world, my D&D world that I've been creating for over 10 years now at this stage. And so I'm going to jump in a few minutes, get started. How are you all doing? How's everyone doing? What time is it where you are? Is it late? If it's late, thank you so much for coming and taking part in this stream. Let's see. My chat as well is usually here on OBS, but for some reason as well, it's not working. So I've got you over here somewhere. So I might be flicking back and forth just a little bit. So nice to see everyone. Thank you so much all for coming. Hello, Meteor Monkey. Brilliant. Well, before I start, I suppose, currently 11:19 p.m. Wow. Thank you so much for coming. And it's late. For me, anyway. I get tired around 10. I'm ready to go to bed at 10. I've got my green tea. I'm not usually like a caffeine person, but I've got like a green lemon and ginger tea here to kind of get me through the night. Oh. You didn't lose anything so far. I've just been waiting for everyone to basically hop on board. So we can start whenever people want to start. But has anyone got any questions before I hop into the world of Gostar? Any questions for me personally, or anything you want me to cover in this live stream? Because this is for all of you at the end of the day. So if you have anything that you want to ask before I get started, do. I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can. As we go along, 420, nice. Yeah, I'm gonna try to get through any questions that you have. So this is a bit of a Q&A, a bit of me also showing my world. But yeah, let's see. Dido, is that pronounced? Am I pronouncing that right? Dido, 256 says, "I don't have work tomorrow. Might as well stay up late." I was shocked when I noticed you really only have 3,500 subscribers. You deserve more. I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. In due time, I hope that I'll have, 10,000, 20,000, million subscribers. It'd be great. It'd be fantastic. If I get to like a really massive audience, if I have a lot of people following me, I would one day love to publish this world as a D&D module that people can play games in and experience, because this world, the world of Gostar, is it's really old. I've been running this game for ages, and I run many games in this world, and they're all set in alternate timelines and different realities. And I run these games. I ran a lot more on Twitch a while back. I'm kind of down to maybe one, and occasionally like fun ones as well. I stopped my main game that I've been running for like 8 years in this world. I stopped streaming that recently because they're going to a very interesting part of the universe, and we're kind of coming to the end of the campaign, and I didn't want to be stressing over this crazy stuff that we're doing, so I was just like, I'm going to just leave this to us as players. It started with us just playing in person, and it's going to end just playing in person without being live. But I'm rambling a bit, but what I was going to say, each campaign that I run in this world, the world of Gostar, takes place in an alternate timeline or different reality. So all of them kind of knock off each other. Any characters that are made by players might be found by other players, in their games, in totally different campaigns, and they might meet them, and they might have completely different lives because they never became an adventurer like they did in whatever world. What have we got here in the comments as well? Alec, I don't know if it's a valid question, but how do you deal with creativity blocks? Thankfully, I haven't had many in a long time, but I think the main thing is just if you can't come up with anything, if you're struggling to come up with anything, I wouldn't force it. I think it's like trying to force anything. It's just not going to come out the way you want it. I typically will go on YouTube actually a lot of the time and just watch some of my favorite YouTubers. They always give me great inspiration. I might watch a really good fantasy movie or any movie that I maybe want to do a setting in. Say if I want to get more sci-fi vibes, I might play Cyberpunk. Or I might watch something like Avatar because it has so many beautiful ideas. I've started reading One Piece. I don't know how far I'll get in it, but that has some insane world building. So I think if you're having a creative block, you just fill yourself up with other creative things that aren't your own, and hopefully they inspire you. But the main thing, I think, to stop yourself getting a creative block as much is just be creating every day. It could be anything, just daydreaming, that counts. Any ideas I have for my campaigns and stuff, I have a notes folder on my phone, on my iPad, wherever I am, I'll just write it down. And that kind of just keeps that muscle moving. It's a muscle, it's like anything. If you don't run often, then when you go running after 6 months of not running, you're gonna struggle a bit, and it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna take a while to get back into a rhythm. It's like any muscle. Dido says, Dido, why don't you die though? Okay. Dido. Perfect. That actually, I get it. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. I feel like that should have been in bold. I do that so often on YouTube. I try to put asterisks in, and it doesn't make my text bold. Media Monkey says, any major sources that inspired Gostar? Yeah. Big sources for Gostar is just our mythology. The idea with Gostar, the world of Gostar, is it is a kind of reflection. It's connected to this world, because originally I created Gostar to be a fantasy world. It meant to be like the Feywild that my friends fell into. So the longest campaign I've been running there for about 8 years. Most of the players in it are playing themselves, who have come from this world and fell into a fantasy world. And this world, Gostar, that eventually became Gostar, the idea is that this is where all true myths and legends and everything come from. So, for example, I have a being in Gostar called Tyr, and he is this dragon. And a lot of things that have happened to him are similar to the mythology that we have in this world, but I like the idea that the mythology that we have in our world are the same story, but it's been changed over long periods of time, so we've only gotten snippets here in this world. And so whenever I want inspiration, I often look to mythology, but as the world grew, I kind of relied on mythology less and less, which is kind of interesting. And it's kind of now its own creature and amalgamation, but it's got everything. Like at one point, because it is like the Feywild, like time is different here when the players move to Gostar. and then moved back to their own world. They wanted to eventually return. When they went back, like thousands of years had passed, like 2,000 or 3,000 years had passed. They went back to like a cyberpunk world, like Earth that was dying. And so now in Gostar as well, because there's a window between these two worlds, a lot of cyberpunk influences are mixing with fantasy. Like people who've come from that cyberpunk world are adapting in this one, and you can find relics, these old ancient artifacts across the world, like anything from laser rifles to mechanical arms to old PS2 games. Like I have a blacksmith. He's the most legendary blacksmith in all of Gostar. You can make anything you like. He's called the Hell Forger, and he is obsessed with pop culture from our world. So if you can find him any kind of like DVDs or PlayStation games, he will give you like a free he'll fix you up a weapon for free, which I just love. Like at one stage, one of my players just spent like 4 hours just talking through the Marvel Cinematic Universe with him, and it just blew his mind, and he just was like in awe with all these stories and just became best friends with this guy. So yeah, there you go. There's the inspiration. Let's see, what are the questions that we got here? Raycraft, is that how you pronounce it? Raycraft? You madman, you're planning something with a timeline timelines colliding, aren't you? Yeah, I've done actually a campaign in this world. It was a mini campaign to do with time travel as well. I've always wanted to play with time travel, but yeah, I try to avoid timelines colliding, but because they're kind of like alternate realities more than anything, maybe slightly back or forward in time. But people in my campaigns have crossed over into each other's world. I had a series of games as well called the Wizard games. So whenever we didn't have all the players for one campaign or all the other players for another campaign, but people still wanted to play D&D, we would get whatever players we could from whatever worlds, and a wizard would drive around in a DeLorean and pick up characters from different universes and bring him to these space wizard games where they play as like pinballs in a giant space pinball machine, or they had like this epic pillow fight, or all these other things, but they get to interact with each other and play with each other. Play with each other sounds bad, but they get to all interact and have games together, which is also really fun. But maybe one day, things might mishmash together a bit more. Things might get a bit gooey and messy, because the oldest campaign that I've been running, they're off to fight the god of everything. So in my world, there are multiples of the same god across the different multiverses, but there is only one dreamer. He's called Zachariel. This is the dreamer who dreamt up the multiverse. And my players are currently on the way to the end of the universe to go beat this guy up. And kill him and because if he wakes up, the universe ends. He's basically, the universe that he creates is just his dream. But I'll get to that a little more when we actually start talking about the world. Thank you for the comment. Alex says, I like to give a lot of magic items to my games, but I always end up with OP players. Yeah, magic items are a great way to break your game. Do you have a recipe to balance your creatures to stronger players or something like that? I did make a video on CR levels, and that might help you. It works for me. I don't know if it works for anyone else, but it has done me wonders, and it doesn't make sense the way I've explained it. And it's a bit of a troll video. But it does work. The calculations in that video, you should check it out, how CR works or something like that. Go check it out, because it does teach you some good things. Henry Keki, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you. Balancing, it's tough. You could give the enemies magical weapons, but then your players get magical weapons at the end of the fight. I wouldn't ever destroy the weapons. I've made a video on how to balance like high tier play, and there's some nice tips in there that might help you. One is have things more than just like kill the creature and it's dead. Have other things going on in there. Have civilians that need saving. Have other traps or environmental hazards, or have a timer. Have some weird device that changes the environment constantly, so they have to readapt to things, but the monsters aren't affected by that. Also try ambushing. Try surprising your players. It's usually the players that are surprising monsters, but try have things show up in the middle of the night when the players are sleeping and get the better of them. Have invisible assassins, have untrackable creatures who can't be traced. Maybe they have some sort of fey pixie dust over them so they can't be scryed on anymore. But yeah, also check out my videos. I've done a few things on that. Let me see what else. Alec also says, because my combats are getting a little easy for my liking. Yeah, can always also just try to have alternate tasks. If there's a monster, really big monster that's emerging, have the whole thing that it maybe can't be killed. It just has to. They have to find inventive ways to like send it back from where it came. That can be fun. Just if you try to get away from focusing on combat specifically, or like health and hack and slash, that kind of stuff, and come up with more like abstract puzzles, that works. Raycrafted, I just multiply the monster's HP 2 times, 3 times. Thing is, adding more HP kind of just makes the fight a little boring in my opinion, but if it works for you, yeah, absolutely, that's great. Prequel side shots. I've done prequel side shots. Yeah, I love doing that, and I'm also running it. So most of the games that I run in Gostar are more or less around the same timeline, but I'm running one. It's a nice personal game that I'll be running for some friends, and it is set several thousand years before the main kind of timeline of Gostar, and it's been really fun because it's far enough back that it shouldn't really affect the main game, but I'm understanding the lore of my world thousands of years ago, which is really fun for me as a DM. But also there are little ripples that come through into the other games that later on, which is so much fun to play with. The Dreamer is not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. He is, thank you, Blue. He's a wonderful little boy. And he's discovering that he is under a lot of pressure right now because he's going to be wiped out at some point. So because of this, he's now starting to play around with other campaigns, other timelines, and like trying to come up with ways to save his own ass by interfering with other people's worlds, which you are very familiar with, Blue. Media Monkey says, I often give magical items, and I'm unsure about a limited number of charges per day. That I'm unsure about only. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, limited number of charges. I do that all the time. I limit a lot of charges, or just have them as a one-use item. They're always nice. They're like one big impact, but if I was a player, I'd just be hoarding all those because like every opportunity is never the right one. You want to save it for this big thing that will never happen. But yeah, charges are good because they don't feel like wasted then. Amber says, my general rule with search the bodies, if they can call out a specific to specifically look for an item they saw, you have to apologize as well. I'm processing very slowly this evening. It's past midnight for me, so they have to call out something they're specifically looking for, like a sword wand. Yeah, that's a really good idea, and it's a great way to like. I've seen that in a few videos now on YouTube where they talk about if your players want an item, don't try to get that from them. Just have them investigate the world, ask NPCs, there's somewhere I can get something that does this, and then slowly over time you as a DM can start processing that. Maybe they have to do a quest or something. It's lovely giving your players that agency, like that control over the game, like they're looking for something specific, and that's always fun. Let me see. Emma says, with my main game I do side shots and they affect the regular quest, but it's great when I need a break from the main campaign or we're missing players. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I did the Space Wizard game. They were originally meant to be like no consequences. Like if you died, you just came back as long as you were wearing your wizard hat. And they're just a great way to have fun playing. Another thing I love doing is like cultists games where a mini story happens in the campaign that you're playing, and everyone gets to play as like a cultist, or everyone gets to play as like a bandit, or a kobold, or a kuatoa. So you're a group of these really squishy creatures, and you go off on a little adventure that's happening somewhere in the world, like a mini dungeon or something like that. You can use a dungeon maybe your players skipped, or it could be a dungeon that your players have already been to and they're going through what's left. And it can just be so much fun, because when you die, you're dead. And maybe you can take up another character or something, but it's just like really fun to see who survives that. And it's very like, it's called Dungeon Crawl Classics, where you do these kind of like session zeros, where if you survive, those are the characters you go on to be level 1 characters. And I love the idea that they can become characters that the other players meet, other NPCs in the future. Right. That's enough talking, I think, for me. It's been about half an hour, so I think I should introduce you to Gostar, if you're already... I'm sorry, I keep scratching my nose. My skin is so dry. It's so dry here, and it's so cold. It's about like minus 20 degrees Celsius here, or something like that. So when you go out, like all your face, just all the moisture is gone, and it's a good time. It was very beautiful. Okay, so before I start, I'm going to see if I can play you a little video of the history of Gostar, if you'd like. So bear with me. I'm going to switch over to, I think it's in the break video. I forgot to set up an actual video thing, so bear with you. You might not be able to hear me for 2 seconds, but bear with me. Yeah, okay, I've got it. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick little video before we hop in on the history of Gostar. It's a bit of an older video. The quality's not as great. I'm better at editing now, but it'll give you a sense of Gostar before we hop in. So I'll be back whenever it's finished, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes. And here we go. Gostar. The Gods Tier. The world of Gostar drips from the elemental chaos like a teardrop. And the further from the chaos that you travel, the more the world cools, stabilizes, and becomes livable. The gods created this world as a sanctuary, originally for themselves to escape the madness that is the chaos. But as they filled it with wonders, it came home to so much more. Gaia, the leader of all the gods, molded this world, separated it into 6 distinct realms: Jotunheim, the Veil, Olympus, Limbo, Diu, and Kini. Each of which she left to her children, the 6 dragons of Gostar, known as the Phalords, to protect. Lucifer, the oldest of the siblings, claimed Diu, the fiery land full of rare treasure, gemstones, and gold. Tyr, the white dragon, claimed the frosty mountainous realm of Jotunheim, building impregnable fortresses to encircle his own castle, built into the biggest glacier he could find. Cain took over the stormy realm of Olympus and helped erect entire cities into the skies. Abel governed Limbo, a land warped by millennia of psychic wars. Gostar, the Gods Tier. The world of Gostar drips from the elemental chaos like a teardrop. And the further from the chaos that you travel, the more the world cools, stabilizes, and becomes livable. The gods created this world as a sanctuary,
originally for themselves to escape the madness that is the chaos. But as they filled it with wonders, it became home to so much more. Gaia, the leader of all the gods, who molded this world, separated it into 6 distinct realms: Jotunheim, the Veil, Olympus, Limbo, Diu, and Kini, each of which she left to her children, the 6 dragons of Gostar, known as the Faelords, to protect. Lucifer, the oldest of the siblings, claimed Diu, the fiery land full of rare treasure, gemstones, and gold. Tyr, the white dragon, claimed the frosty mountainous realm of Jotunheim, building impregnable fortresses to encircle his own castle, built into the biggest glacier he could find. Cain took over the stormy realm of Olympus and helped erect entire cities into the skies. Abel governed Limbo, a land warped by millennia of psychic wars. Lilith took over the Veil and tended to the delicate ecosystems of the magical and natural world. And then finally, Titus, the runt of the litter, was left Kini, a wasteland of undead, monsters, and eldritch horrors, a land where few humanoids can be found, and any you do meet will not survive long. The dragons eventually warred, like all rulers do. Abel fell to Cain, Tyr was mortally wounded, and those that survived were hated by mortals for the destruction they wrought. The Faelords were pushed back into the fringes of society and were eventually lost to the fog of legends and time. But that does not stop them from interfering with mortals' plans, for the threads of fate weave ever so tightly on our heroes who stand and fight the chaos that threatens to consume.
I'm gonna turn on the mic. I'm gonna turn on the mic so people can hear me. Wow, that went beautifully. Absolutely fantastic. Let me just make sure everything else is on right now. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna actually turn this up. I'm gonna switch over here to yes. Okay, perfect. God, this is going great. Yeah, all I was saying beforehand was like, yeah, I could do streams, no problem. I did one already, and I was like so vigilant the whole time. I was making sure everything was going right. This time I was like, yeah, I did it once. It's just gonna happen automatically now. But no. So that was the history of Gostar, kind of loosely. There's a lot to it, so I'm gonna go through it all very soon. But yeah, so essentially the Dreamer, the artwork as well, it's absolutely beautiful. It's by my partner, RoseryBlue on Instagram, if you want to go check them out. I'm going to add all that to the description of this video. I already had started adding all that to the other one before the other stream destroyed or self-destructed, but I'll do that very soon. Regardless, the Dreamer, he's dreamt up the universe. He's created everything, and from there we eventually got Gostar, which is defended and protected and looked after by all of these gods. Let me see here. I recorded 30 minutes of gameplay video muted. Oh yeah, happens all the time. I'm constantly doing that when I'm streaming as well. Like, can't be heard. I did a whole stream, 4 hours or something. My mic wasn't working the whole time. But anyway. Yeah, yeah, so eventually we came to the world of Gostar. And I'm going to jump into Gostar here. I'm going to move my OBS over here so I can see. I'm going to have to cut over here to the stream and the chat and everything. But this here is Gostar. You've got 6 distinct realms. You've got Diu, Guinea, Jotunheim, the Vale, Olympus, and Limbo. And so yeah, this is it folded out like flat. So it looks kind of like a 6-sided star, but when it's in its full 3D shape, it looks like a ball sack world or a teardrop. All my players call it ball sack world. It's kind of stuck with me. But you've got the Vale, which is your kind of classic, vanilla fantasy world. Jotunheim is a cold wasteland, icy wasteland with like massive towering mountains. One of my campaigns is taking place there right now as well. It's really fun. It's kind of got like an aesthetic similar to Old Norse kind of vibes crossed over with kind of like medieval Japan. Really lovely kind of, they actually work quite nicely and are used in a lot of interior design. I think those two crossed over is actually like quite popular at the moment, or currently. At one stage it was a vibe. Guinea then has like the smallest population of humanoids in a realm. The main majority of creatures that live in Guinea are either undead or kind of some sort of aberration or monster or some other kind of creature. And there's very few humanoids that live here. It's actually really dangerous to live here in Guinea. I'll actually zoom in so you can get a better sense of Guinea. Here it is. And it's a nasty place. You've got all these kind of classic terrible names like Rockfall and the Bone Sea Desert, and you've got the Hellscape Peaks, the Black Sea, the Bone Sea, all this pretty nasty. It's kind of got big Dark Souls vibes, and it's a good kind of point of reference, or kind of Lovecraftian horror. You might have these old, like, rickety, run-down seaside towns or something like that, where all the residents are now fish people. It's really eerie and dark, and the humanoids that do survive are usually like real cutthroat and ruthless people. And so eventually they do kind of like collide, like kind of gather together in small communities just to survive, but it's all backstabbers and murderers and thieves and plunderers, so no one can trust anyone in these small colonies. And they do have usually a leader who is the one who's just the most brutal, and no one wants to backstab because they're going to get slain. And so it's very Mad Max in that vibe. The small kind of communities of humanoids that do exist are very Mad Maxy. Moving on from that, we've got Diu, which is a fiery hellscape filled with volcanoes all around, like rivers of lava. But then you have these beautiful, tall, kind of pencil-like mountains that go up past the dark, smoky, heavy clouds that kind of block out most of the light from the sky in Diu. And above the pollution are these beautiful sanctuaries where people build monasteries, and it's a polar opposite of the kind of like doom hellscape that's down below. These are places where people learn to become monks and train meditation and healing and all this kind of stuff. So you've got that beautiful duality here, very much a yin and a yang kind of territory, and a lot of the aesthetic here is based off of a lot of kind of Chinese mythology. A lot of Eastern mythology here. And then we go to Limbo. So there's a few people messaging in the chat there. Let's see what you've said there. Oh yeah, which way is in and out towards the chaos? It's a good question, actually. So I'll show you here. I'll zoom out again. So the chaos is at each of the tips. So right here at the center of the world, that's kind of the base of the teardrop, of the ball sack world. And then as you go up along it and get further away from the center of this map, the closer you get to the chaos. So I'll show you here now. We'll go back to Dio because we were just there. As you can see, a lot of the world kind of starts to tear away, and then you get to the oceans usually, as you get further and further away from the base of, or the center of a realm. And things get wilder and weirder as you go along here. Eventually the sea disappears and becomes kind of like a chaos sea where there's floating islands all around. And actually had a whole adventure take place in the Vale, near Bale Green. This is like a pirate city. It's all basically, it's entirely run by pirates, and they have all moored their ships up on top of this place and stacked all these giant ships on top of each other, and they have become the buildings for this city. And there's other pirates that go off from there as well, but there's lots of gambling and kind of internships and stuff happen here. But one of the games took place on this crew that go out to like the Chaos Gate, and they take the boat out to the long sea, where eventually the boat has to like take expand sails like out to the side so it can like fly around the Chaos Sea and go to all these floating islands. And they harvest this chaos ore, which is just pure chaotic magic, hardened and solidified into a rock, which is basically what the rest of Gostar is. It's a more solidified version of the chaos. And they mine this stuff, and it's used for all different kind of magical items. It's just like raw. If you think of it, like it's kind of like magical plutonium or something like that. It's just pure energy, but it's very dangerous and highly explosive, all that kind of stuff. It's not a stable material at all. But that's how you get there, is towards these different spikes at the end of each of the realms. What else has been asked here? Because I've got the chat now over to the side here, so I keep missing things, so I apologize. Amber says, I hear these descriptions and just envision a written campaign settle with a gazette providing information and history of various regions and their inhabitants, geography. Listen, I've been writing this thing for 10 years. I have so many notes, but none of them exist in like one place. I have countless amounts of notebooks that contain the lore of Gostar and each realm and each city and stuff like that. I have physical notebooks. I have dozens and dozens of notes files on both my iPad and my phone. I have Google Docs all over the place. And then I tried at one point to kind of like bring it all into one place, bring it all into OneNote. But then OneNote just became a different dumping ground for everything. And it's also on some Discord servers. I have to go into Discord sometimes. I'm like, what did I say here? Whatever. But it would be a dream come true if I could just make it into a book just for myself, so I know where everything is by looking at just one book. Yeah, it's pretty rich. I'm actually quite proud of this world. Yeah, I'll get into like cities and places soon enough as well. Settle equals setting. Yes. I don't know if Alex says, I don't know if it was intentional, but Dio's lands kind of look like flames. Yeah, I actually, in the original sketches for these places, had them in another notebook somewhere. I played around with like nice shapes. I wanted things to look pretty. This was actually originally meant to be a skull, but I was like, oh, it's a bit too cheesy, so I just made it look a little weird. There's still kind of the nose here in the center. I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but the Black Sea is kind of the nose of this skull, or kind of like an eye. I can't remember which one it was. And then all these islands were kind of like its teeth. But it was kind of too on the nose if it looked like a skull. But it's cool that you spotted Dio as well. Yeah, Dio is kind of flamey, and it's become less flamey, I think, over time. But it does look like one overall cartoon flame, which is kind of cool. I'm pretty happy with. Dio is very much like a limbo. Is very much kind of there's a massive divide like between the ocean and the land. It does kind of come around. There's very little land, as you can see. As you get towards the chaos, and there's reasons for that as well, lore-wise, but also just visually, there's a lot of divides in Limbo, and I'll explain that because I'm just getting onto that soon. But yeah, it's a lot to do with Limbo. Olympus I'll get to as well soon, but there's actually 3 layers to Olympus. This is the middle ground. There's also a whole underground section. There's all these floating islands as well in the sky. So Olympus is split into 3 realms, 3 kind of layers. Apologies if I miss anything as well, because I'm going to bounce back and forth between the comments here. So the obvious conclusion is index. Yeah, it just takes time, and most of it's all just in my head, so I better get it all up before I start forgetting everything. But you know, one day, eventually, I will make this into a book, hopefully. OneNote is great, and I have started bringing a lot of stuff into OneNote, but a lot of the core foundational stuff, like cities and Pantheons and all that, is in OneNote. But like smaller places, smaller towns and magical items and stuff like that, and NPCs haven't all made it yet. So, but over time, eventually. So, as for Limbo here, Limbo is also known as like the Warped Lands. There's been years and years of psychic wars here, and throughout history, it's been conquered a lot by Illithid. And Gith as well have kind of been battling between the Illithids and trying to reclaim this land. It's been a back and forth tug of war kind of situation. Eventually, a lot of the Gith were wiped out, and there was, you know, the Githyanki and Githzerai, and they just kind of became one. Because for me, when I was writing this at the time, I didn't really know the difference between the two. I didn't want there to be a divide, so I was just like, let them just be the one community of just Gith. I'm just going to make peace with them all because they have a bigger threat that is taking over their entire realm here. So at one stage in the history of Gostar, I'll get to the Feylords. Feylords are these big powerful beings I'm going to get to. Well, you saw them in the opening of this, but one of the Feylords, brain's going blank here now, I'm getting into 1 a.m. territory. It's just going to get more and more melty as I continue the stream, but oh my god, his name is gone from my head. Abel. So Abel was kind of the lord of this realm, and him and Cain, there we go, Cain and Abel, they pushed back the Illithid. They pushed them all back into the chaos, so they took off on ships and retreated long time ago, and everything was good, everything was well and good. Eventually Abel died, was killed by Cain, and so almost overnight, literally overnight, in the span of a few hours, out of nowhere, this entire Illithid kingdom here that you see appeared. It destroyed entire cities. It just appeared. Everyone woke up and millions were dead. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were dead. Cities that used to exist here were instantly destroyed as this kingdom erupted out of nowhere. And it's kind of this mass, this collection of these kind of crustaceans the size of mountains, these purple shells. They almost look like kind of beetles curled up. They span for miles and miles and miles, hundreds of miles, and they kind of disappear into the ocean. And for some of my players who have been inside here, it's like being in one giant living organism. And so now the Gith, as you can see here, have all been pushed back to this tiny portion of Limbo. The rest is split up into the Warped Lands. The Warped Lands is kind of basically the battlegrounds. If you imagine like World War I, like No Man's Land, this has just been so warped from the psychic wars that took place here. It's unstable. It's kind of got like psychic radiation. All the creatures here are strange and dangerous and deadly. No one knows anything about it, really. It's a terrible place to move through. The Toxic Jungle is a place where one of the gods died. He fell down here and made a massive hole in the ground when all these gods were warring. And his skeleton still exists here. And when he died, and the God of Life, getting into Pantheons here as well, I'll get into them soon. God of Life eventually split themselves into a bunch of other gods. One of the gods ended up here. They're the god of life that comes from death. The life that comes from death. So they're usually associated with mushrooms and fungus. from the body, all this mushroom and fungus grew. If anyone's played Monster Hunter World, the Coral Highlands and then the Rotfall below that are big inspirations for this. And a lot of dunamancy studies come from here because there's these coral mountains all around the toxic jungle, and then down in the depths of the toxic jungle there's just like masses of mushrooms and fungus and everything else. But the coral mountains, the coral peaks, they excrete this oil, this dunamancy oil, this kind of gravity oil, and it kind of falls down into the base here and kind of evaporates and becomes this kind of mist that exists in the toxic jungle. And so the further down, the deeper down you go into the toxic jungle, the denser this mist becomes and the heavier you become. So eventually, if you fall down any of the kind of ravines that exist there, you become so heavy that you cannot move, and you just become another kind of rotting corpse amongst all the other fungus and rotting corpses there. So that's a really cool place. Like my players took place in some adventures that do it. Jesus, it's so late. But my players had an adventure there, and it was really, really fun. I'll stop for a second and I'll go over here now to some questions that you might be having. Let me see here. Where was I before? Amber says, I will purchase a book when it's available. Oh, thank you. Kat says, I also will buy it. And you're very kind. Amber's, I'm not kidding when I say this. It feels, it has the same depth and lore as Eberron. Oh my god. Oh my god. That did something for me. That was like, oh my god, what a compliment. My goodness. Gosh, I would love to make like a setting that could not rival Eberron, but like would be in that same fleshed out stage. You gotta help me with words here, guys, in the chat, because I'm struggling. The green tea is not quite enough caffeine. That would be a dream come true to make something like that. But yeah, I love this world. I want to share it with the world. Potema says, oh nice, you're still streaming. I am. I don't know how long for. We'll see. It might take me 2 hours, it might take me 3 hours. As long as you're still watching, I'm happy to keep talking. And my voice might go eventually, and that might stop me, but we'll see. Nice to see you, Potema. Potema is one of my oldest players ever, by the way. Amazing player. I have thrown them through shit and hellfire, and they have survived everything. Their character embodies this world and all the worlds that I've thrown them into. What an incredible character Potema plays. Potema actually plays Potema from the cyberpunk world, so it's like they're called Future Potema, and they're an incredible character. You're like level 22 or 23 now or something. So much fun. Chaos Incarnate. I also feel bad for all the emotional damage I've caused your character. I still feel guilty for it, but you seem okay with it, so it makes me feel a bit better. But you know, as I learned to be a better DM, I discovered that maybe I tortured my players a little too much earlier on in the campaign, and now all the characters are just so numb to everything. I haven't explained the Feylords yet, but I will be getting to it. I did show a little opening about where they talked about the Feylords and the history of Gostar. But if Feylords are what people want me to talk about, I can do that. Also, I don't know, if this goes on for too long and I don't cover everything, I can try another stream when I get to 4,000. We can cover whatever we didn't cover here. 4,000 subs. Let me see. Oh, my chance to travel through the warped lands. Oh, yeah, and you have briefly traveled through it. Cat is another one of my players. They play Quill, a tiefling, so like a tiefling goblin amalgamation. Yes, you got to travel through that a little bit. Oh my god, my brain's gonna struggle to pronounce this, but Capobanda. That wasn't too bad actually. Capobanda. Only a bit in the video. Yeah, so I will. Oh, that's in the Feylord thing. Yes. Meteor Monkey. Yep. Talked about the mother of the Feylords and how they give the Gostar. Yes. Oh, I like the little dancing pajama goblin. Thank you. If you want to become a pajama goblin, I got a Patreon, and it's only $1 a month. and I can share all this homebrew stuff with you and different NPCs from this world. Ambers, I'm getting some great ideas. I'm gonna go share on Discord. Alec, I have to go. Oh, thank you so much, Alec. Thank you so much for coming. It's lovely having you here. See you soon. But it will be uploaded on YouTube, don't you worry. I think YouTube does it automatically. It does. 6 hours later, he'll be streaming asleep on his desk. Yeah, it'll just still be going. Okay, see you later, Meteor Monkey. Thank you so much for coming. Right, back to Limbo. If any of you have questions as well along the way, do please ask. And I'll try to answer them as best I can. Golden one over here is kind of like a big intern forest. Think of it like the cotton farms in America. There's a lot of them there, and that's a really horrible place to exist. Sona, or Sona Samrafti, is heavily inspired by like Arabian mythology. You've got these giant, if you think of also like Aladdin, that kind of what's the city in Aladdin called? But there's just beautiful, massive plazas and markets. It's this really rich. Excuse me, I'm drinking too much tea. It's a really rich trade town. It's mainly due to the fact that it's mainly due to this little mountain pass. This is the only way in and out of Limbo and Olympus. This is how you get between the two places. It's through this small pocket, so you have to pass by Candy and Splendor in order to get anywhere here. And back in the heyday when the Fey Lords were at their prime, these two kingdoms had beautiful relationships, and so these massive cities began to flourish because of all the trade between these two places. And so they still stand as these massive pillars of wealth in all of Gostar. And also there is a faction here called the White Cross, which is this giant college or establishment of healers, non-magical healers specifically. So it's like a doctor academy of sorts, and there's a whole ranking system there where every discovery you make in medicine gives you different ranks, and gives you white crosses, which are like a way of determining your rank as a doctor. And also you get some, if you ever, for every like 1,000 people or 100 people you save, lives you save, you get a white cross, and so on. So that's that. You've also got some uncharted areas, which are a huge spoiler area that no one's gone to in my world, so I'm going to not talk about those here. And you've also got this Mind Storm, which is also just a big, massive psychic storm that no one can really navigate through except for the Lithids, conveniently. So they've kind of closed off all this area, so it's been uncharted. No one knows what exists there. And maybe some of my players will eventually. Who knows? We'll see. I'll bounce back to the chat because I'm also seeing it whiz by there in the corner of my eye. What happens in the middle where all the different regions meet? That's a good question. It's actually just really boring, funnily enough, because it's the most stable part of Gostar. It's just, I imagine it just being flat green fields. That's it. There's nothing really of interest right at the center. It's just super neutral ground. Just green fields as far as you can see. Can we get an approximate size of a hex? Yeah. 1 hex is... Oh, I just shrunk down the chat there. Oops. 1 hex is 100 miles. Originally, they were meant to be like 1 mile or 10 miles or something like that. And I realized when I calculated the size of Gostar, it was only the size of like a country. It wasn't very big at all. And so I started looking at the map of our world and how big and how wide certain continents were and things. And I eventually came to this measurement, where 1 hex here is 100 miles. So I think it works out that it roughly takes 4 days of travel to travel 1 hex. There you go. Beginning village, yes. A beginning village, just for reference, where a lot of players start, is Tavenlock. This is just your classic vanilla town. It's got a lot of lore there. You've got Caterpillar Falls just over here, that fall over like about 100-foot drop of a cliff. And there's a small little island in the center of a lake, and then just up from that lake is Tavenlock. You've got everything there. You've got a little wizard tower. There's a little turtle called Brian, and he's actually part of a chronergy. It's called the chronergy. It's 4 members in all of Gostar, and they protect the timeline. They protect time itself and time magic, and they govern over time magic and make sure that no one's kind of really messing with that, messing with time, messing with the foundations of time. And any discoveries that anyone makes, they're like, hey, yo, give it here. We're going to protect that so no one else can use it in any bad ways. Batema says, I wrote my own version of Gostar where the veil is called At the Ash Heap, because it nearly all burned down. Sad. So Batema's also DM'd in an alternate version of Gostar as well, which has been really fun. Tavenlock, yeah, it doesn't sound how it reads, but that is Irish for you. And I think it just means kind of like, Taven is like, I think it's not a home or whatever. It's kind of like, it's like lake house or something like that, I think it translates to. I've also got every language in D&D, because this world is so intrinsically connected to our own world. I have found out which languages in our world have derived from the languages in Gostar. So every language we have on Earth has been derived from a fantasy language. The notebooks over here. I think I have it. It's one of my older notebooks. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. One of my very first notebooks for Into the Multiverse. I have written here on the inside of the notebook. Actually, this is the very first sketch of Gostar right here. And there it is, Ballsack World. I also tried to come up with like different kind of coordinates instead of north, south, east, and west directions. I went with like a whole other system because it's not a sphere, it's a different kind of shape. So I had like a direction if you go towards the chaos, that's one direction, or if you go clockwise or anti-clockwise around the planet, or if you go towards the base of the teardrop world, that's another direction. But it's just so much easier to say north, south, east, and west. It's like putting fantasy days into your world, which I have done, but it's hard to do because no one naturally wants to use those. But yeah, I've got some languages here. So like, for example, Sylvan is what inspired Ohm, and eventually kind of like, so I use kind of like Celtic, Irish, for a lot of the words here in the Vale, which is where Sylvan is primarily spoken. So a lot of these are kind of derived from Irish words, and I kind of like, basically I find the Irish words, I mash them together, and then I take away words as the name became more and more easier to pronounce as it changed over time. That's kind of what happens with names of places anyway. They kind of get shorter and shorter. You might have, you know, like the city on the hill is the name of the town, and then that eventually becomes like Hill City, and then eventually just becomes maybe it's just called Hill, over years and years and years. Same happened with Gostar. Gostar's name changed. It was originally called the God's Tear, or the God's Tear. Actually, originally it was the God's Tear because they tore through the chaos to make it. And then that eventually changed to God's Tear as they discovered the shape of it. They're like, they kind of forgot that it was a tear. They were like, whoa, no, it's tear. It's actually, because they're spelled similarly. They're like, yeah, it's a tear. And then eventually that just became God's Tear, and then eventually became Gostar, or Gostar, or God's Tear, whatever. So it got shorter and shorter and shorter. So now it's Gostar. And they're like, it's a star, because when it flattens out, it looks like a star. So it all makes sense why they call it what it is now. If that made any sense to you. What has been said here? I have it in PDF somewhere. I do have a PDF somewhere of everything. I have everything. Yeah. So, other languages are connected to other things. I've got Draconic here that's based off Sanskrit. And I remember researching languages too, and like how Draconic looks in D&D, and which language does that kind of look similar to, like the way it's written. And that's kind of how I came up with the languages. But moving on, we'll see if we can actually get through all the regions. We'll leave Limbo. I think we got Limbo pretty well covered. So we'll go on now to Olympus. So with Olympus, it's a strange one. As I said, there is 3 layers to Olympus. Originally, it was just one level plane with mountains and everything else, just like everywhere else. But at one stage, some of the Fey Lords, along with Tensor, actually. So you know the guy who invented, the spell Tensor's floating disc. Tensor's a character in this world, and he kind of has specialized in levitation and lifting things up, that kind of stuff. He's a really powerful wizard. Kind of exists in the current timeline of Gostar, but he's just a brain inside a robot body. That's like this indestructible robot body. But no one has really met him yet. Anyway. He worked with the Fey Lords to lift mountains into the sky. These mountains floated up, and they call that New Olympus. And when they carved out the mountains from the sky, they left all these holes and caverns and everything in Old Olympus, which was on the ground. And over time, they realized they needed a way to transport between Old and New Olympus. So they created these lightning rods. They're these giant spikes, these kind of crystal spikes that go up into the air. And people have these hand panels, these kind of panels they put their hand on, and they're turned into lightning energy, and they're shot down from the top of New Olympus down through one of these lightning rods, these crystal lightning rods. They go through a series of pipes, and they get sent to the next kind of hand panel down below in Old Olympus and reappear there as themselves again. So teleportation, essentially, kind of like futuristic sci-fi teleportation. So eventually, over time, they had dozens of these electric lightning rods, which are all of these blue dots. Every one of these blue dots here is a lightning rod. They were used to teleport people from top to bottom, or bottom to top, back up again. And you had all these pipelines and stuff like all over Old Olympus. And what eventually happened was, because these networks of pipes were so intricate and they had to build things to like protect them and walls all around it, you had this mass of metal and other materials above Old Olympus. And slowly over time, as little parts of the floating islands eroded and rubble and dust would fall down onto these pipes, they eventually became this huge flat wasteland. And so that is what this middle ground is. It's called the Thunder Plains, and it's the plains between New Olympus and Old Olympus. And most people can't really travel between New Olympus and Old Olympus unless they take a skyship or whatever. So this just became a big barren wasteland, and it's still an essential trade route, though, to get things from the Veil to Limbo, for example. And so what these lightning rods became, as also all of these floating islands, they are these massive, they produce a lot of energy, like arcane energy. So you have these arcane storms that surround them. And they kind of like, when you're on the Thunder Plains, all you see is these dark stormy clouds above you. And a lot of people get hit by lightning. Big inspiration here as well is from Final Fantasy X, which I think there's a place called the Thunder Plains. And that's just massive inspiration for this area. And so the only way you could travel in Final Fantasy X around that area is by running from lightning pole to lightning pole. And so these crystal posts became, they were used for trade routes. So traders would follow the lightning poles so they could safely travel through the Thunder Plains without being struck by lightning. Which was kind of cool. go over to chat again, see if anyone's been talking. I don't know why I struggled with that. Capobanda says they speak the fictional language of Listen, it's 1:20 in the morning. I'm not going to even try. I'm sorry, but that is funny. Schwitzerlandic. Yes. Watcher Online says big beam me up 10C energy in Olympus. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a massive thing. When my players first discovered this is why I think the best stuff comes from games in D&D when you haven't planned a lot for the game. Originally in my head, when I made the Thunder Plains, it wasn't called Olympus, it was called the Thunder Plains. I invented it to just be this big barren wasteland of lightning and storms and stuff like that. And I hadn't invented New Olympus or Old Olympus, and my players were traveling through it, and they're really bored because there's nothing to do here. They just travel for miles and miles and miles. And at one stage, my players, to pass the time, were teleporting into the air and just letting themselves fall and casting things like Orb of Invincibility or Invulnerability on themselves. And so I had them roll a dice or whatever, see what happened. And I thought, like, wait, there's got to be something below this flat land. And so when one of my players came crashing down, he's half a ton, one of the characters. He's made up of just gold and rock. He got repaired. He was kind of torn apart, and he was repaired by like a titan. He kind of infused him with runes and gold and rock, and he's this kind of like half titan warlock sorcerer. And so he weighs a freaking ton, and he was flying miles into the air and crash landing into the ground. And so I was like, yeah, you smash down, you see all these mechanical cogs and pipes and everything. And I had to make a dexterity check, and one of the pipes he'd fallen through broke, and a shot of lightning hit into him. And it was this dwarf lady who was teleporting from the top of the world down to the bottom. And her consciousness and her entire existence just merged with his, and he had this dwarf lady in his head for ages, and they went on a whole other adventure to like return her to their grandma and get the dwarf out of him. And but in that moment when he crashed down, like my cogs went, and I in like a matter of like 5 minutes or something, I understood what I wanted this world to be. I was like, there are sky islands above, that's what's causing this and this, and they're teleporting down using lightning, turning themselves into lightning into Old Olympus. And then they went down, they explored that whole area, and it was really, really cool, it was amazing. And then what I loved as well is like between these two areas in the Thunder Plains, just below that where all the cogs and pipes and machinery all exists, there are swarms of rust monsters, which is also just a nice little fun thing. He was made of gold, so they were going to gobble him up, and that was scary. Now, moving on then. Has anyone got any questions as well? Please do ask away if you have any questions at all. Send them my way, and and if this is getting too boring or whatever, just let me know, and I'll move on to something else. I can talk about NPCs, I can talk about magic items, whatever you like. That's Olympus. You've also got the Lightning Seed, you've got all these other islands and everything else. A lot of giants exist here off the coast of Olympus, but that's it. And a lot of craft cities exist in Olympus. There's a lot of the flying cities all kind of revolve around innovations in magic and science. So that's just a fun little thing. And then you got the Vale, where a lot of adventures typically take place. This is your classic vanilla world, like I said. You've got jungles and forests and beautiful cities. It's also very heavily associated with magic. Magic is really big here. And in each realm, you have a being called a Watcher. And they're like this protector, this keeper of peace between, in the Vale, for example, they are the protector between the magical, they keep the balance between the magical, the political, and the natural world. That's their job. In Jotunheim, they're kind of more of a peacekeeper, just in general, stopping wars and everything else. And they're called the White Wolf of Jotunheim. They're this sword master. They don't use magic or anything like that. They use their words they try to deal with everything through peaceful means. But they have a sword that can destroy pretty much anything if they draw it. So people usually listen to them. In Guinea, there's more of a witch, kind of voodoo-esque character who mainly just looks after and helps out all the monsters that exist there. They're not here for the people. They look after the undead and everything else, and they study them and they learn about the afterlife. In Diu, they're kind of like there's only been one here for a very long time, and that is the Monkey Queen, I should say. They're called the Monkey King, but she is called Goku, I think. Yeah, and they just play. They look for deeper meanings in life, and they try to find the good and the fun in life. And they just try to spread that through doing. So that's who they are. In Limbo, again, these are places that people haven't really met the Watchers for, but the Watcher here in Limbo, they just tend to the toxic jungle. It is this very special ecosystem, unlike anywhere else in Gostar. And they keep the balance of the toxic jungle. That's their job. So they kind of specialize in like rot magic. They're usually like a spore druid. And then Olympus, they all specialize in teleportation. They've just developed that way because the place is so divided all over the place. They're kind of like a Hermes character. They're a messenger that carry notes, and they explore the world. They exist to travel and spread the knowledge that they learn all around the world and zoom across the world to spread it all. They're just kind of like a postal service as well. Here we go. Watcher. I feel seen. Yes, Watcher online. Yeah, you could be a Watcher yourself. One of my players has become a Watcher as well. They're the Watcher of the Veil. And funny enough, I existed in my world. There's a character called Old Gabriel. And he exists. He's the Watcher of Jotunheim. Actually, he's just a big old batty old man. He's a big cuckoo. He kind of got trapped in a basically like the hyperbolic time chamber from Dragon Ball. He got trapped in one of those for like 50 years, and he like lost out on so much of his life, and he just spent those 50 years training how to use a sword. So he's insane, and struggles with socializing. Capabanda says, usually our Watcher's not always the same. No, so the Watcher is a title, and it gets passed down. You can take on people to carry the torch of the Watcher. So it works differently in different places in the Vale. You need to study for 100 years how to use magic, and you need to know everything about the natural, the magical, and the political world. And so there's one particular college that produces excellent students, and you learn a specific kind of magic. It's actually a homebrew class. It's kind of like, it's not a normal class in the sense that you start at level 1 with it. It is kind of like it's a tack-on class. I don't know how best to explain it. Basically, it replaces whatever subclass you have for a magical, whatever you use if you're a caster. So if you're a bard, if you're a wizard, whatever, then you take you're a Bard of Swords. Up until a certain point, you follow the Bard of Swords subclass. But when you become what's called a Spellweaver, that's it, yeah, Spellweaver, you stop progressing as in that subclass, and now you continue progressing as a Spellweaver. And it's a very particular type of magic. It's all about playing with the weave of magic and being able to solve problems and manipulate spells and use magic in a way that no one else can use it. And so it's this special art, and it takes about 100 years to study. And you can take up, if you're talented enough, you'll become a Watcher of the Veil. If you're taking and there's only been about 8 of them or so in the Vale, and currently one of my players is the Watcher of the Veil here. So there you go. As for Jotunheim, you have to master the sword, you have to master a whole bunch of other things. And when you become a Watcher of Jotunheim, when you become one of the White Wolves, you get this kind of crystal teardrop. And it can only be used to train a new apprentice. You exist as the Watcher for as long as you can. And when you think you're getting too old to continue, you take on an apprentice. You find someone, and then you crack that crystal tear. And you're both teleported into like a hyperbolic time chamber where time doesn't move outside of this space. And you spend however long you can training an apprentice. And when that apprentice leaves, they get a new crystal teardrop. And they can use that to pass on the knowledge to their next apprentice. What was said there? Watcher Online says, my OG-ness can't help but feel like Limbo's missing out on meeting the other lands in the middle. Yeah, for sure. They are tied to the toxic jungle, and they are the thing with the toxic jungle as well. It kind of exists as this impassable barrier between the Gith and the Illithid, and so long as the toxic jungle exists, neither will wipe the other one out, and so that's kind of its function as well. It's this kind of wall that no one crosses, and if people want to cross it, they have to go through the Watcher to do so. So there's a temporary peace that exists here in Limbo because of the toxic jungle and the Watcher that exists there. As for the toxic jungle, I believe it's interesting. The person who is in charge of the toxic jungle now has been in charge of it for centuries. And the only person who was in charge of the toxic jungle before that, I believe, was the god itself that exists within the toxic jungle, and they took on this person as an apprentice. Diu, the original Watcher, is actually one of the Fey Lords, and I'll get to that later. And now their daughter exists as Goku, as Wukong. Sorry, not Goku. They're not called Goku. Sorry, they're called Wukong. As for Olympus, Olympus has had the most Watchers, as there was a race that was typically the Watchers of the Veil, and they were the Hairkin race, and they are like this, rabbit humanoid kind of race, and they don't live very long. They have very short lifespans, but they learn really fast and they adapt really fast, and so they kind of are seen as these like flashes of lightning that are brilliant, but they don't last very long. And so this has had like the most amount of Watchers, as they die quickly. So they pass on their information to the next person, this one particular teleportation technique. That's how they get around so fast as well. And one thing with the teleportation technique as well is it also shortens your lifespan a bit more. It strains your heart a lot. The current Watcher of Olympus, he's actually like a descendant of Fey Lords, and he's got a very long lifespan, so it actually suits him really well being the Watcher of Olympus. So there you go. So those are the Watchers. These are the lands. I suppose I can go and I can talk to about the Fey Lords if you would like, but I also realize I've been talking about an hour and a half. I don't know if that's too long. Let me know in the chat if you want to hear more about Fey Lords. I can go into those. I can go into cities. Put it down in the comments what you'd like to see in the chat, and we'll go and do that. Or if you think you've got enough of Gostar for now, we can leave this. We can do another stream later when I hit maybe 4,000 subscribers. We'll do another one, and I can go into specifically the Fey Lords and maybe NPCs and stuff. So let me know. Love to hear about Fey Lords? Yeah, we can, absolutely. If there's anything else other people would like, I should do next time as well. I do a stream. I think I'll start a little voting system as well, and people can just click which one they'd like to see most. Toxic jungle, interesting. Yeah, so the Toxic Jungle is a fun one. I think I gave like a pretty good breakdown of it, but I have some artwork of it as well. I can see if I can pull it up. So we've got the Toxic Jungle, we've got Feylords. Is there anything else anyone would like to hear about? If we have a third option, or if anyone else says either the same thing, we'll just go with that. I'll sit here. I'll just chill. I'll rest my voice. Feylords. Although that would be a good topic for next stream too. Yeah, I think I can show up. You've seen the artwork for the Feylords. I think the Feylords are actually, yeah, they kind of deserve a video all to themselves. So maybe the next video I do will be a breakdown of NPCs and the Feylord itself. I think it's a good idea. But I can go into Toxic Jungle and some other specific areas that you might be interested in too. Or if there's any questions you have about like how any of these came to be, or like I don't know. You ask away. My eyes are heavy. I'll see if I can find some notes here, some of the old kind of sketches and drawings I had of Toxic Jungle. Let me see. I'll be looking through those while you let me know what you want to do. The gods, are you still awake? So Rose is my partner, and she should be asleep. I could do the gods actually, although the gods are also a very big topic. Okay. I think, okay, I'm going to do a poll after the stream at some point to see if people want to see about my Pantheon, to see about my NPCs and the Feylords. I think those are two topics. If there's any other topics you want me to cover, I think I could cover those there. Let me get I had a PDF for the Toxic Jungle. Let me see what is that. Are seas shared? Yeah, so it's kind of weird, this map, because it's all curved, if you get me. So that's a good question. So if you see here, like if I could, where those two lines separate, they would actually connect when it all folds back around. So basically, if you come to say this point over here, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but if you come here to this little area, see that little island there on the left, that would connect directly over here. You have been lurking in the background. So yeah, let me just draw it, because I'm not sure if you can see the see anything. So let me just do a little line. So these would be like directly connected, and then this is connected, and like that's connected. So that, yeah, if you could fold those and stick those together, they're actually all connected. Yeah, the seas. Some are more closed off, but they're all kind of roughly connected, and it gets more and more grey as you kind of go further down towards the chaos. Let me see. I'll show you very quickly while I'm here as well. I've got some other maps. Island, Jotunheim, Rimgraf. I'll show you one of my cities as well. Sure, we'll go Rimgraf. This is a city where some of my players are taking place in. They've just arrived. One of my campaigns just arrived from Rimgraf. This is a city in Jotunheim. It's a big, massive stronghold in Jotunheim. And this is great. I'm using Wonderdraft in case any of you are interested. It's amazing for making maps. This is a pretty big city, this one. All stuff I would love to put in a book. Wait, what's that? That I understand, but since they start to spear. I understand, but since they start to spear, yeah, so they kind of eventually become just one chaos stream eventually that isn't really on the map, on the main map. Eventually just disappears and fizzles out to like one very dangerous thing. You know what? Actually, I will show you the a map of the universe, like the cosmology of Gostar, the universe around Gostar. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a room graph for you, there you go. Let's see here. Do I have it here or no? I'm going to actually switch over to Dungeon Draft, which I use for my main battle maps and stuff, and I can also share images there. So I'll do that. So let me open it up. Because I'll give you a good sense of how the chaos stream works and everything. So let me move over to Dungeon Draft. There we go. Actually, that's going to be a bit too... No, it's okay. You should be able to see okay. Now, let me just open something up. Let's go with... maybe not Demu's Temple, it's a bit too complicated. Let's go with the Illithid. Yeah, sure. It's Illithid Council Chamber. Sure. Then you get a sense of what's inside. Yeah. This is kind of like what it looks like inside the kind of Illithid Kingdom. All very fleshy and meaty and everything else, all that good stuff. But I'm just using this as a base to open up a new map. So I'll go to level settings, new level. I should call it new level. And I'm going to import an image here. So I can go and I can trace images. And I'm going to go to, where is it now? Bloody hell. Not generic maps. Oh man, it's in... This is... I have too many files as well for different maps and things. Let me see, it might be in artwork. Oh my god. You know what? I might be able to just yeet it from Discord and throw it in here. Hold up. Very convoluted way of doing this, but I have it somewhere, but my brain is just not in it for like looking it up right now. So I'm gonna just save this image. Let's save it just on my desktop, please. Now, yeah, save that. Cool. And now I can open that up on my desktop. Map of the universe. Of Grayskull. Map of the multiverse. There we go. Gonna scale that up and turn up the opacity. Turn off the grid. And now, let me see on OBS how that looks. Okay, I'm very zoomed out. I'll zoom in 2 seconds. Yeah, so here's the map of the multiverse. So let's zoom in here. It's a nice little technical drawing that's probably been done by some wizard or other. It's been done by me, but I kind of wanted it to look like an old sketch of what they think the universe looks like. So you've got Gostar right here in the center, and you can see it continues stretching off into the chaos, and the chaos is just all of this cluster outside of Gostar. So around Gostar here is just kind of like it's a neutral, safe area. It's kind of like just our version of space, like our solar system, if you will. You've got other things that branch off from it then. For example, you've got Mimir's Well, and it's this giant river that goes all the way from space into Gostar, and it is the very first river of Gostar, and it from this river, all other rivers emerge all around Gostar. And there's a whole temple in Jotunheim where this river comes down into and is separated into these different vaults and things. It's a whole water temple. One of my parties had an adventure there, and this was constructed by one of these gods called Thoros, and he forged this giant construction to siphon water all over Gostar. But it is also a portal of sorts to the elemental plane of water. Thank you, Embers. Also, the sun is actually, if you get to the sun, it's actually just a hemisphere. Technically it's a ball of fire. But it's also, these lines here indicate that it teleports you to the elemental plane of fire. So if you were to fly into the sun and survive, it's actually a portal that will take you to the elemental plane of fire. And it goes both ways. But outside of the kind of safe space that's around Gostar is the chaos. You've both got the inner, or what's called the wild chaos, and you've also got the, are they both called the inner? Okay, I've called them both the inner. Oh yeah, this whole thing is the inner chaos. Sorry. Brains, of course. Sorry, this is the inner chaos, and then out here is the outer chaos, and this is where all the gods' realms exist. What happened when Gostar was made and it was pushed through all of the chaos, it kind of separated, kind of broke and split into these two areas, and what flooded in the space between was like just pure solidified chaos, like it's sectioned off, like organized chaos, which is like elemental plane of earth and magma and everything. If you look at it as well, I sound like a mad scientist now, but the middle ring here, where you've got elemental plane of air and fire and earth and water, if you see that as like the core of the chaos, and then it starts to get fuzzy as you go out from that, and you get both the gods' realms and you get the inner chaos as well, or the wild chaos. So basically the wild chaos is impassable. Nothing can leave the inner chaos into the realm of Gostar, and nothing can travel from Gostar into the wild chaos. You just turn into energy. The wild chaos is just pure energy. Fire is exploding into shards of ice that melt down into rocks that then turn into butterflies or clouds of gas or whatever. It's just all the elemental planes mashed up and stirred up, and only the craziest things can exist here. It's split into two halves, the Abyss and the Nine Hells. So you've got one half, the Nine Hells, which is a slightly more organized version of Chaos, where the devils live, and you've got the Abyss, where the demons live. And they can't enter the realm of Gostar unless they come here through a portal that will kind of stabilize them and give them some sort of solid form when they arrive in Gostar. And that was a whole other story arc where one of the Fey Lords were opening up these portals to invite demons into Gostar to live and everything else. What has been said here? Finally managed to join. Stupid interest. Oh, don't worry. I've been rambling on. I'm talking about the cosmology of... is it cosmology? I'm just talking about the multiverse of Gostar now at this stage. But I will be doing another streams where I'll go more into NPCs and the gods and the Pantheons and stuff like that. But thank you so much for coming, Chris. I'll be chatting for another little while anyway, at least. So, you've got the Nine Hells, you've got the Abyss, and that's where demons and devils live. And then outside of that, in the outer ring, that's where the gods live. And in between, you've got just the core elements. So Gostar actually moves through. It depends on... If you see these all as wheels as well that turn, nothing's flat like this, but this is an easy way to visualize it, because nothing's as straightforward as this. But if you imagine this ring here of the elemental planes as a revolving ring, and that stream, the kind of chaos stream that leaves Gostar, that is a unmoving line. It doesn't move, but the other areas move around it. So at certain times of the year or just in certain times of the day, if you traveled along the chaos stream, you might end up in the elemental plane of ooze, or you might end up in the elemental plane of water. That can totally vary, and the influences of all of these planes affect Gostar in different ways. At certain times, like that's how I think a lot of people use certain types of spells as well. If the earth or the elemental plane of earth is connected to Gostar at a certain time, then spells like Maximilian's Earthen Grasp will be more powerful, or maybe it was created for the first time when that thing aligned. So that's another thing. All these circles here, these represent just portals. Like you jump from this point into the elemental plane of ooze and so on. This little circle here that says Demogorgon, that is the Demogorgon's realm. He's got a small little mini domain. Similar to how gods have domains, the Demogorgon has a specific domain as well. Moving out then, you've got a different domain for each god that exists in Gostar. I won't go too much into them, because I'll do that in another video. But they all exist here. You can see one as well is a dead domain. Its domain still remains of Baraka, who is the god of sound. He was killed. He fell into he's the god that fell and made the hole that formed the toxic jungle. So that his body is there. And that has become this whole new god, which is a branch off of Artemis. Artemis was the god of life, and when they first made Gostar, they just filled the world with life, but nothing ever died. Sorry, I got a ring. Nothing ever died, and so at one stage they decided maybe things should die. They invented death, and Artemis split themselves up into 4 other beings that would govern different aspects of death. There was the Mother Doe, who was all about life, and they're known as the god of day. There's the Morgan, who is the god of night, and they are all about death. And then you've got these other 2 gods. You've got Undaskar and you've got Maljara. Now Undaskar is this giant yak kind of being that has like a tree that grows out of its back. It's massive. It's hundreds of feet tall when you see it. And you can only see them at twilight. And during these moments, you can maybe see them in the highest points of Gostar, typically in Jotunheim, and occasionally you might see Undaskar appear. And whenever you see Undaskar, everyone will see a different tree on their back, and on all the branches of the tree are different lanterns, these kind of glowing lights, and each lantern at the end of each branch represents a story, someone's story that they've left behind on your family tree. Everyone will see a different version of their own family tree. And so Undaskar records the stories that you leave behind after death. So they are about the that progression from life into death, and what's left behind. So they record everything. So every ripple and influence that you had on the world is recorded by Undaskar. Maljara then is the god that now exists in kind of exists in a semi-realm domain in the toxic jungle, and they are all about life that comes after death. So what things need to die so new things can grow. So that's typically associated with mushrooms, like fungus grows from corpses. They live on dead things, and so that's a massive kind of symbolic being that relates to Maljara. So there you go. It's a little bit about a couple of the gods. The Watcher Online says the Sunbeam portal is a jaw-dropping moment for me. No way. Okay, that's really cool. Yeah, so at one stage, my players who've been running a game for about 8 years had a spaceship, and they're traveling to the end of the universe now to destroy the god of everything. And they had to decide where they want to go. They couldn't travel directly into the chaos because they'd be torn apart. So they had to find some sort of portal. And they had to figure out, do they want to go to, like, which elemental plane did they want to go to? And one of them wanted to drive directly into the sun, and I actually had a whole thing prepared for it to drive into the sun. If anyone's mad enough to do something, I'm here to support that. Instead, no, they found a hurricane that existed in space, and that brought them to the elemental plane of air. But it's really hard to find. It's one of the hardest things to find, but luckily they actually had a way to find it. It's like finding an invisible needle in a haystack. It's just like near impossible, but they did it. They've done a lot of near impossible things. Capabanda says, what about undead? That should be life after that. That is kind of life after that. And I believe that that undead, usually in this world, I think what a lot of people believe is that they don't have souls. There are things that can bring a soul back for a moment. Or, you've got things like revivify. So that is kind of like a form of necromancy. If you revive someone, that's kind of like bringing them back. You put a soul back in the body, they can animate. But necromancy different. And I've got a few different ways in which it works. But a lot of the time they don't have personalities. They don't have a soul. They've got some sort of personality, but it's not the same. And it's a whole other like can of worms you can open up there about like, are they alive? Do they have a soul? And it's a really good question. I love kind of things like this. It's like there should almost be a whole other god that's just governs over necromancy. And tries to fight for that. And I actually have a guy, he's was in another campaign, like a one-shot that I ran, where they were on this ghost train and they all realized they were already dead. And they were traveling to the next life to be either reincarnated and have their soul made up into something else, so that there's only like a finite amount of souls that exist in the world. So eventually your soul gets sent on to be made into something else. Oh, in relation to the Dawn God, yeah. I like the idea it's just a thought I had now that makes perfect sense, that necromancy isn't giving a soul to someone. It would instead be, animating the body so it can move, and then it has that fraction of a personality. Like they basically steal from that god Undaskir, steal part of who they were, put it in them. So it's not their soul, but it's the remnants of who they were. That's cool. I'm gonna write that down. Damn. Just gonna write Undaskir equals necromancy, because that's something I've just been trying to work and play around with in my head for ages, but I never made that connection. You're very cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. Capabanda. Amazing. Equals necromancy. Hell yeah. I love stuff like that. I love it when people ask me really difficult questions about the world, because I'm like, bam, 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 I can connect this and this. It gets easier as well. The more people ask questions and the more things I work at in the world, the easier it becomes to answer questions. I find it's like, it's like any kind of machine. The more information you input into it, the easier it is to give you answers back. I'm actually doing a big talk on world building at some stage. I'm going to a festival to talk about world building at one point. And that's a good one to mention. Just this little scenario that's taking place. Let me see. Kat says, the train guy. I really enjoyed the campaign. Yes. So there was a whole other guy. He used to be a part of the Morgan. He was kind of like this kind of tumor of sorts of the Morgan. At one stage, when death was invented by the gods, they, for the very first time, they loved it. They were like, oh, this is so cool. Things can die now. And so they kind of made it a game to like kill things and see who could kill things in different ways. And like, they really loved playing around with this thing. But Morgan had to clean up all these souls. And the thing is, the Morgan, they're this really calm being. They are this kind of bulbous black mass with a long head and like a white mask on their face. Kind of similar, actually, funny enough. I didn't know about this with the Raven Queen in Critical Role's world, but there's some similarities there. This one's more bestial, though, kind of much more like a Ghibli creature, kind of like No Face almost, but more feathery. So she's this really calm creature, never says anything. The only sound you hear sometimes, if you ever witness the Morgan, is the chiming of a bell, like a silver bell. It's specifically described as a silver bell. There's no, can't usually tell if it's silver or not if you hear it, but you just know it's a silver bell. But there are times in history when so many people have died in one go that the Morgan can't organize the souls fast enough, and they just start gobbling them all up and just shooting them out, and they become whatever. She doesn't matter. She just needs to organize the souls, and she becomes blind, and she just then starts just devouring people who aren't even dead. She just sees souls and starts consuming them. And when that got really bad one time, during this kind of thing with the gods, and eventually gods started dying. They started seeing if they could die, and they did. And people didn't like how crazy the Morgan became with death, because it kind of made everyone else crazy with death. It was kind of like, because she is death, everyone else became obsessed with it. It's because you're playing with concepts here. So at one stage, she removed that part of her, this side of her that just wanted to consume souls, and didn't matter like what they became. And that being became this villain for a one-shot I ran, who wanted to destroy this soul train, this ghost train, and just bring everything into chaos again. It was very fun. Their name I cannot remember off the top of the head, but you see them actually in the opening that I played for you. He's like this kind of green guy. It looks like he's got a skull face. He's based off of the Green Man in mythology. He has a name actually in mythology in general. And I will tell you now, as soon as I find it. I've on my iPad here. Just gonna find it, and I'll show you a picture of them too, if they are here. Yes, Cernunnos. So I think it's in Celtic mythology. I'm not entirely sure. This is Cernunnos. So they are obsessed with changing basically how death works. They don't believe that souls should be just reincarnated in something, and there should be that organized system. They think that souls should battle it out with each other to like be a more powerful soul, and emerge as something more powerful and strange. And there should be this kind of middle, what's the word? Christianity. You've got that the space before you go to like either heaven or hell. My brain has gone completely blank. But there should be like a middle ground where souls can see if they deserve to be something better or something worse, rather than something just random. Let me see. Kat says, I love the Morgan. She's fantastic. I'm really glad she's my character's patron. Thank you, Gabe. My pleasure. It just suits you so well. Cat plays this amalgamation of like kind of everything to do with death. You're playing like a kind of death-related rogue, a death-related bard, and a death-related cleric now. So you just embody death as a whole, and it's very cool to see how your characters progress. And you are also an undead being, like part vampire now as well. Watcher Online says, now a stream watching you develop ideas and run wild with it also seems fun. That does seem fun. See that light bulb moment develop into a brainstorm. That could be fun. We could, I know, I've seen, what's his name as well? Pointy Hat. He's been building a world with his players, with his viewers, his audience. That's kind of cool. I don't know if I'd do that, but I could definitely develop aspects of Gostar, which could be really fun, or building a whole system. Could we could have a stream where we build my class's skill tree system. That could be fun as well. But I also like the more juicy stuff as well, rather than mechanical stuff. But we'll see. I'll put out some poll at some stage, and you can all see, what you want in the next upcoming stream. It just says limbo. Cool. Chris, you say, damn. Do you do your own art? Yes, I do, a lot of the time. But also, I am very fortunate to play with a lot of illustrators and artists as well, who all contribute to this world. And so the really cool thing is, if I made an art book, there are literally hundreds of illustrations out there of this world, of its patrons, of everything in this world. And it would just make a really banging book. Yes, I'm a graphic designer, illustrator and stuff like that, and I do murals as well. But yeah, I'll show you another one if you'd like. Let's see here. Let me see if any got any gods. Here's the Morgan. This is the lovely Morgan herself. I know this thing is kind of blocking. Oh, I can't block the camera. But there she is. There's her face. No, that's going to focus. But she's this black mass with a tiny little. Is it Go? I can't remember the Japanese kind of theatrical play. I think it's Go masks. That's what the mask is based off of. Let's see, we got one other god here. Ramsey's a bit horrifying. He's kind of this god that no one likes. Actually, one of my party, this is great. This is just my brain deteriorating slowly over time. I can't speak anymore. One of my favorite creatures or monsters or encounters I ever threw at my players was a boat. So I said this in the last stream, but keep it a long story short, I've talked about Kingdom Hearts with my players, and this how convoluted it is and full of like plot holes and retcons, and I kind of compare it sometimes to Gostar, but I think Gostar is a bit better. I hope. But I have to in one of these videos, I showed it to Patema, and they kind of do a breakdown of Kingdom Hearts lore, like in 30 minutes or whatever. And at the end of every boss battle, all the bosses for some reason turn into boats. And so David just kept asking us this joke. Like, it became this running joke with my players, like, so when are we fighting a boat? When's the big bad going to turn into a boat? And at one stage it went to Limbo. They went to fight the Illithids, or like to ask the Illithids to join this cause for them. And to test them, the Illithids wanted to see how these characters who have trained naturally through their lives, how they would compare to enhanced beings that the Mind Flayers have tempered with. And so they fought them. There's 3 of them. They killed them. And all the while, like within this kind of like internal living city that they're inside, there's all these kind of treasures they've collected over time. And there's massive ships, there's massive weapons and everything else, all hanging above, like attached to sinewy strands of flesh. And at one stage, the Illithids are a bit like, oh man, they kind of beat those kind of fast. And so they drop a giant ship on top of the players. And there's this really badass moment where one of the players, who's a robot, he's got like insane strength and stuff like that. He rolled a natural 20 and he caught the boat. And saved everyone below, so no one got crushed by this like several ton boat coming down on top of them. And then as he was holding it, the 3 mutated creatures began to merge into one big mass and take over the boat. And then the entire boat turned into a monster that they fought, and they had to fight a boat. And this is the boat. I have to kind of get it out of the way, the lens, but this is the boat. There at the top, the head became, let me see if I can zoom into that. The kind of mast, not the mast, but the front of the boat was kind of like an amalgamation, like very like Final Fantasy. You know, you've got the like little torso at the end of the massive ship that you're fighting. So that's kind of them at the front of the ship. And it shot things out of its eyes and had tentacles. And it was such a cool fight. And it was such a nice moment to see my players like get excited about fighting a boat. But yeah. Do you do goosebumps? Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you got goosebumps. Chicken legs. Do I have a favorite patron or aspect of the world? That's a really good question. Patron-wise, I love the four gods of life and death. They're really, really fun. They mean a lot to me. But one of my favorites is the runt of all the gods. So, when the gods stole all the eyes of the dreamer, they needed help from one of the gods. They didn't want to invite this guy along, but he knew so much about the dreamer because he was kind of like an Igor of sorts. Like he always kind of like, no one ever went near the dreamer, but he did, and he knew a lot about him. And so he knew how to like incapacitate the dreamer. So they brought him along and said like, yeah, sure, you can share this new world with us when we make it. And this person is called Ramses. And they are as eldritch horror as you can get. They're this abomination. And they embody fear. And when they made Gostar, they said to Ramses, you know what? They didn't want him in there. They knew he just destroys everything he touches. And you know, when they took the eyes of the dreamer, and while the dreamer's incapacitated, he was off to the side, like taking things like toenails and parts of his skin, removing bones from the dreamer, like that he stashed away for himself. And so when they made Gostar, this beautiful new world, they knew he was going to ruin it. They're like, we're not going to give it to this nasty guy. No one likes him. No one wants to hang out with him. So like, hey, we'll make you a replica of this world, and you can just have this world all to your own, but you won't touch our world. So they basically made a duplicate of Gostar. And they're like, you can go hang out there and do whatever you want with it. And like talking to a toddler. And so they give him this mirror world of Gostar. And he destroyed it. There's nothing left there. All that's left is kind of like darkness, and the floor is made of just stone faces. And there's nothing else. He just exists in this like hideous place. And it's very inspired by Kingdom Death, actually, very similar to that setting. And this is basically my world's Shadowfell. And he was told he can never go and set foot in Gostar. But he found kind of a loophole where he can interact with it as long as people come to him. So he builds these things in Gostar called ram shacks. They're these shacks that have a tiny appendage of him, literally like a little blown up balloon appendage, kind of rubbery white skin thing that runs the shop. And if you go to ram shacks, he doesn't deal in money. He deals in trades. Whatever he thinks is valuable to you, he'll take, or in exchange for whatever. So say he has a shot. He has really weird stuff in his shop as well. Like he might have a shotgun, or he might have like a talking head or something. And depending on how much you think the thing is worth to you, so say you really want a shotgun, you're like, man, I'd love that. He can tell what physically would be worth as much to you. So it doesn't even have to be a physical thing. So he might be like, okay, if you want the shotgun, I want a handful of your hair. And if you agree, he will just rip it straight out of your head. He'll give you the shotgun and you'll never get that hair back again. For one of my players, he took one of their horns. He like sawed off one of their horns in front of everyone. He like slammed their head down and just sawed it off. And he's the creepiest motherfucker. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. I don't know if he's creepy as hell. And I'll show you some artwork of him. I'll show you some artwork of the appendage if I can find it. Actually, this is a great thing. I can get a token. I have tokens of him. So let me get Ram Shacks. There he is. This is Ram Shacks. And his original design is based off of a Psychic Pebbles animation called Orphans, if anyone wants to check it out. Where he's a really creepy guy selling orphans to someone. But this is him. He's got this kind of rubbery skin. He hasn't got eye holes. They're just kind of like as if someone put their thumbs into like, as if you got like a balloon and filled it with flour. He's kind of like that. And you stuff your thumb holes into that, and that makes his eyes. His mouth just opens up. It doesn't actually go back anywhere. It's just like, it's like if you stuffed your fist into the rubber and then just stuck teeth in it. He's got a wiry mustache, he wears a little top hat, and he wears different costumes based on the theme of the shop. So if it's like a potion shop, he's kind of got robes on, and he's got little alchemy sets in front of him, or this is his kind of like vanilla costume. But what he's attached to is this. This is Ramses. So... I think you can see my mouse here. Yeah, so this is what Ramses actually looks like if he had a physical representation. He has a grey, bloated child's torso, where one of the hands is even more bloated and engorged, and all over the baby's torso are slits that open up to reveal eyes. He's got kind of like these praying mantis limbs that are made of bone. He's also got a bone face that turns into horns, and then he's also got this other tiny hand, kind of humanoid hand that's covered in warts and rotting skin that comes out the side of his head. He is hideous. And then you might notice at the bottom here are these appendages, these just masses of greyish white flesh that stretch out and divide into little pseudopods, and those are Ramshaxes. So my world's got lots of fun, quirky, fun things, like nice, happy magic thingies, and then it's got things like this. So this guy is attached to Ramshax. There you go. How do people think of that? Yeah, like upside down Gostar. Yeah, well, the upside down is based off of the Shadowfell in D&D lore. So yeah, basically same thing. And is it possible to travel to Ramses? Yes, it is. So in Ramses' shack, he has a door. And so you come in the main door, and you come into the shop, and there's windows and stuff like that. And then at the back of the shop, usually there's a counter. And behind the counter, there's a door where the appendage comes out of. And it's usually always closed, but sometimes the appendage leaves there. But if you ever want to open that door and go through, you will end up in the Shadowfell, and you will be permanently scarred. One of my players has a permanent madness from being there, where I think he has to drink to forget. So he's become an alcoholic now to forget what he saw in the Shadowfell. Yeah. Watcher Online says, I'm afraid to ask what the inspiration was for Ramses. I just tried to make something as scary as possible. But I was originally just I wanted a fun, quirky shop that doesn't use money. And just things grow from that. I have an idea, and then it develops and develops, and he became a god eventually, because I was like, well, what is behind the door? It's a god. But yeah. Nacho Libre. But yeah, I'll get these off the screen. But yeah, there you go. And then beyond that, you got the God's Realms, and then you've got the Abyss, and the Great Beyond. And the Great Beyond is where the Dreamer exists, and all of these little orbs are their own little universes, and they exist all over the multiverse. And I kind of imagine them like little tiny snow globes that float around the Dreamer, who watches over them all. But let me see. The original idea was so he could torture his players. Well, you know, I actually thought when I first invented him, I thought he was going to be a funny haha kind of guy. I thought people would be like, haha, yeah, I'll give you my hair for these cannonballs. Cool, let's do it. I thought it'd be like a fun exchange, but no, people don't like it when you it's for limbs and memories and things. People are immediately sus and they don't want to buy from him. I had one player though who actually bested Ramses. It was really, really cool. He went into him and he was like, I'll give you my hand in exchange for power. He knew how to set this up. That's the way to play with Ramses, is you go in and you're willing to offer something like very valuable right from the start. And little did he know, at one stage, I didn't even know that it was genius. So like sessions and sessions and sessions passed. Like a year ago, these players were like tormented by this Feylord. At one stage, they had like created replicas of all the players' hands, like severed hands, and like arranged them all with middle fingers. So when the players arrived, they realized they were all going to die, basically. They saw their own severed hands. And so he actually had kept that for like a whole year. And he went into Ramses and he offered the hand to Ramses in exchange for like this really powerful gift. And Ramses was obviously a bastard because all his things have a twist on them. And in this case, the thing that gave him power was the skin of his dead father that he could wear. And it would give him like massive amounts of temporary hit points, but he would watch his father, when those temporary hit points disappeared, he would watch his father die all over again in front of him. And then at a new dawn, the skin would regrow and reform, and he could wear it again if he wanted it. He refused to wear it, but he had the power of his father. That's what he got, and that was his idol. Like his dad was this hero in his eyes. So yeah, there you go. That's a good note, I think, to leave the stream on. We can go more into the gods next time, I think, because it's nearly 2:30 in the morning where I am. But if you have any last questions before I wrap up, we'll go on for like 10 more minutes. If you have any other things you want to ask before I go, then please do. Let's go back over to this bigger screen. There we go. It's a bit nicer. Let's close all this. Bring this over here. Whoa. Oops. Here we go. Now. Also, apologies again for the start of the stream. It was a bit of a mess, but I'll have that hopefully sorted out for next time. Let's see what questions people got. Chris, you ask, do I have a primary source of inspiration? Yeah, at the start of the stream I had mentioned that a lot of the world of Gostar is originally it was connected to our world. So the first players that played through Gostar played as themselves, that came from this world right now, and they fell into Gostar. It was kind of like a Feywild originally. And so I take a lot of inspiration from like mythology from our world. But the idea is that our myths, our mythology that we have, are actual stories that have come from Gostar that have changed over time. So the original story is very different in Gostar, but it's been tweaked and changed as it trickled its way into our own world. There's a big inspiration at the start, but now it's going to become its own thing. So it's kind of its own living organism. It can stand on its own two legs without any kind of mythology or anything. I just love watching YouTube, anime, any kind of media, any creative media. I've started reading One Piece, it's great. JoJo is amazing. All the great fantasy movies. I love, my kind of ideal vibe for a classic fantasy is The Princess Bride. That is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. So that's kind of like, that's the headspace I'm in when I run games. It's not always silly though. We've seen Ramses, he's very dark and twisted, and you have very serious moments as well. I like to have a balance of everything. I love cyberpunk. At one stage, my players, I said this at the start of the stream as well, a lot of my players, they went back to their original world, but because of time is weird and it's a weird soup, when they went back to their original world, thousands of years had passed or hundreds of years had passed. So now it was in this cyberpunk world. And that world got destroyed, they went back to the Gostar, and now because there's been that connection between two worlds, there are loads of things from like a cyberpunk world in Gostar. You can find like laser guns, and you can find robots, and like I also mentioned, things like video games. Like PS2 games can be found as ancient relics, and if you show those to someone in Gostar who's never seen something from our world, they're like, oh my god, this is incredible. So I like to put anything and everything in, just one big pot. Let's see, what else has been asked. Capabanda, sorry, I want to say Capabara. Says, this reminds me of two African gods that are just two halves of a big white man's split vertically, and all the insides are seen, and the two are always fighting and have children. Yeah, so that's amazing. I gotta find out what they are. Write that down. I do love stuff like that though, like I'll find a god or it's just a story or whatever. I've always loved mythology, and I loved Spiderwick growing up as well. Spiderwick was amazing. The guidebook for Spiderwick was like my first monster manual, and I actually take a lot of inspiration from it still. But I love old stories. I think they're just incredible. Just old stories. Another my favorite book series, one of my favorite book series, I actually listened to the audiobook of it, was the Earthsea books. The way they do magic in that is just, it's just so good. That god sounds amazing though. Watcher Online says, third time's charm. Yeah. Third time I'll get the stream running. No problem. And Potato says, it always kind of reminds me of Stephen King's Dark Tower series at times. I'll leave you all with this story. I might have said this in the last stream, I might be repeating myself, but my first experience of like tabletop games, role-playing games, came from my uncle, who, when my cousins were over, he would tell us bedtime stories, and they were based off of the Dark Tower series, and he called them the Gunslinger stories. And we were only like 4 or 5, 6 or whatever. And when he told the story, one person got to be the gunslinger, and everyone else got to choose one character they wanted to be, and they had one superpower they could do, one kind of ability they were really good at. And every night he would tell a different story and theme each chapter around your character. You didn't get to interact with the world or anything like that. He just told the story, you sat back. And it was amazing, but obviously, as time went on, he didn't want to spend time with the kids every night. He wanted to go hang out with the adults, and the stories became less and less. And then I remember I have one core memory when I was out in a tent with all my cousins and my siblings, and I said, well, I tell a gunslinger story. And I said, you can choose whoever you want to be. You don't even have to be the gunslinger. I'll just tell a story. And I allowed the players, when my siblings and cousins, as I told this story, I let them interact with it. I was like, well, what do you think you would do in this situation? And they're like, oh my god, we can interact with the story. And it was the coolest thing ever. And I didn't know Dungeons and Dragons or whatever tabletop games existed for years, and I knew there must be something out there. And I remember reading it was like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Zero manga, like the very original manga for Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's not always about the card game. The card game's kind of in it, but at one of the chapters, what's the guy? Is it Mokuba? No, not Mokuba. The guy with the Millennium Ring, anyway, he invites him over, and they basically play a thing called Zork or Zorn or whatever, and it's basically D&D. And he puts all their players into their pieces, and I was like, oh my god, cool. And there was kind of like the vaguest of rules at the back, and I pieced together something, and I made up a big map, and I painted, and I made pieces out of Play-Doh, and we just used D6s, and I'd invite my brothers up to my room, and I'd tell a story with them, and they'd roll D6s to see if things happened, and I invented a whole system for like how you level up and stuff. And then eventually, when I was about 12, 13, 14, something like that, I found out about D&D. I found it existed, and I got the red box from 4th edition, and I loved it, and it changed my world. So that is how I came to play D&D. I've been playing D&D since I was about 5 years old, but not quite. But yeah, there you go. Story time. Chris, you say, if you're looking for more horror-like inspiration, then look into the Magnus Archives. I've heard of these, yeah. I'm going to write that down, though. The thing is with me, I hate horror. I can't stand it. I'm a big scaredy cat. I'm terrible with horror games. I can't watch horror movies. But I love using it when I'm storytelling. I love using elements of horror in there. So it's really hard for me to consume horror, but I love using that darker side of my brain. It's interesting. And Amber says, that's always the best when you originally developed the ideas and discovered a whole world exists. I loved it. Like before the internet, before I knew the internet existed, I should say, finding out things about like Dragon Ball was crazy. Like I remember we had a video game once, and it was a Dragon Ball video game. There was only like 9 characters in the roster. And I was like, oh, who are all these cool characters? And then we went to like France or something, and you get them in gotcha machines. I was like, what? They're here again. And slowly we found out about what Dragon Ball was, and my brothers got some of the manga, and we read those, and those were good times where everything was a mystery. But I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for sticking around, for coming and watching this stream. It's been really, really fun. And I'll do another one. We get to 4,000. We're only 500 away. Tuesday, I'm going to release a Power Rangers video. So stay tuned for that. And thank you all so much. Have a lovely evening. I'm going to go to bed now. And yes, goodbye. See you later. Now, watch me fumble around for a few minutes as I figure out how to end the stream. There we go. Bye.
Gostar, the God's Tier. The world of Gostar drips from the elemental chaos like a teardrop. And the further from the chaos that you travel, the more the world cools, stabilizes, and becomes livable. The gods created this world as a sanctuary, originally for themselves to escape the madness that is the chaos. But as they filled it with wonders, it became home to so much more. Gaia, the leader of all the gods, who molded this world, separated it into 6 distinct realms: Jotunheim, the Veil, Olympus, Limbo, Diu, and Kini. Each of which she left to her children, the 6 dragons of Gostar, known as the Fey Lords, to protect. Lucifer, the oldest of the siblings, claimed Diu, the fiery land full of rare treasure, gemstones, and gold. Tyr, the white dragon, claimed the frosty mountainous realm of Jotunheim, building impregnable fortresses to encircle his own castle, built into the biggest glacier he could find. Cain took over the stormy realm of Olympus and helped erect entire cities into the skies. Abel governed Limbo, a land warped by millennia of psychic wars. Lilith took over the Veil and tended to the delicate ecosystems of the magical and natural world. And then finally, Titus, the runt of the litter, was left Guinea, a wasteland of undead, monsters, and eldritch horrors, a land where few humanoids can be found, and any you do meet will not survive long. The dragons eventually warred, like all rulers do. Abel fell to Cain, Tyr was mortally wounded, and those that survived were hated by mortals for the destruction they wrought. The Fey Lords were pushed back into the fringes of society and were eventually lost to the fog of legends and time. But that does not stop them from interfering with mortals' plans, for the threads of fate weave ever so tightly on our heroes who stand and fight, the chaos that threatens to consume.
Okay, so just as promised, I don't have Blue. She is passed out and I don't want to disturb her. But I've brought you her very first toy and the state it is in. So, this is Plasma Fox. It's called Plasma Fox because they use like plasma attacks on Blue. Give you an example of Plasma Fox. Plasma Fox, flies around and attacks them and uses their main attack is Plasma Beam, and they smash it to Blue and attack her. So she was given this as a puppy, and as you can see up here, her eye is kind of coming away. She did have a nose that was eaten away, and then my partner Pina, she sewed her up, so now she's got a stitched up mouth. This is all matted down here at the bottom, and there you go. Also, yeah, if you like the artwork there of the Dreamer holding Gostar, that's by RoseryBlue. Go check her out on Instagram.